Welcome to Plain Talk. We are happy to be with you and happy to have our guest on. He is the executive director of the Dakota Medical Foundation, but he's on currently a leave from the foundation to work for the state of North Dakota. He is the interim commissioner of the North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services, appointed there by Governor Kelly Armstrong. And in that position, and there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I mean, this is, if not the largest, one of the largest line items in North Dakota state budget for obvious reasons. Very, very tied into the federal government. There's a lot of things we can talk about that. There's been, I don't know what you want to call them, some speed bumps, some turbulence when it comes to federal funding. But the other thing we want to talk about is, as school has been starting here, the kids have been in for a few weeks now, depending on where you're at, and cell phones. And obviously the legislature passed a new law, really cracking down on cell phone use in schools, not just by the students, also the educators. And, I think people are trying to come to grips with it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Mr. Traynor had some comments the other day, and I pushed back a little bit. I was a little bit critical of them. His comment was to an interim legislative committee was, our use of technology and devices is probably the largest public health threat that we have out there. And he continued, he said, we have a lot of health threats. We have chronic disease, we have cancer, we have, all sorts of other problems. But I think digital device use is perhaps the greatest challenge facing us all, because we are, as a society, completely dependent on these things, and we're excessively using them to the point of interfering with our daily activities of living. And I just wanted to have him come on and have a conversation about that. Pat, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Expand on those comments a little bit. I should explain, I pushed back on them a little bit. I thought we have a lot of public health risks that I would rank far above digital use. And by the way, Matt's reminding me, I should, you're going to hear another voice. Normally you would hear Chad Oban as the guest, as my co-host. But today we actually have a guest co-host, Kyler Collum. Chad's off today. Kyler is a columnist for the Dakotan, also does a podcast. They're very, very focused on Minot, but today he's going to be talking about some statewide stuff. So welcome, Kyler.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for not forgetting about me, and I appreciate coming on the show today to help out.
I forget stuff all the time. I get anxious. I want to get right into it with the guests.
Ready to go.
Yeah, my pushback was I thought that I think there's a lot of things going on in the world that I worry about more than device use. So I took your comments as a little over the top, but
yeah,
you're
fair enough. That just to set the context for where I was when I made that comment, I was at a training that we hosted, and it's called the Battle for Our Attention. So I wasn't in front of a committee. And I had invited people to come. I mean, that were in that Doge committee, that were reporters, and said, hey, you should just come to the training. And so I certainly said those comments, but it was in a training, called the Battle for Our Attention. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Got it.
And, it's a learning curve for me, Rob, on how to say what I'm saying. So I will be honest with you that, and I thought the article on balance was fabulous. And, there are tons of health threats facing us, chronic disease being number one for sure. If, you think about the essence of your life, let's just say Rob Port and Tyler, who are on today, and Pat, who's with you, and we're having a conversation. We don't know how much time we have, in this life, but we do know we have this gift called our creative energy, our imagination, our focus, our energy, the gifts that we develop, and that we discover over our lifetimes. Like you're a dad, being the greatest dad. If you're continuously distracted, in front of your kids or whatever, you're probably not going to meet the expectation that you have, because I know you're responsible and you want to be a great dad. So do I. And so this whole idea is to get us to have this conversation about, is our use of technology on the healthy side, in terms of use and overuse? And are we using it as a tool to help us become more extraordinary, to become more fulfilled, to improve our relationships with our kids, with our loved ones, with our friends, with our coworkers? Or is it becoming such that the usage is so high that it's distracting us from enjoying, the present moment that we're in. So our creative energy and the moment, like we're sharing a moment today. Life is simply a series of moments. And so whether you're with your coworkers, you're around the table and you're dreaming big dreams and figuring out how to help the health of the people of North Dakota, we need to be fully present and engaged with our discernment, our reflection, our creative capabilities, because, we all have these gifts. We all see the world a bit differently. And so we need to utilize these gifts that each and every one of us has. And so my argument is, and there's research behind it, isn't just my, position. It is that if they design these devices to be irresistible, which they are, and there's all sorts of science behind it. It's the age of the attention economy. These organizations are there to extract information about us and then use that information to use it in a commercial enterprise. I mean, so all the things to sell things online, et cetera, et cetera. So my point in bringing it up is that if we lose our ability to be present, we lose our creative potential. And life really, the enjoyment of life is really discovering, deploying our creative potential with each and every one of us, to be present in this conversation. And then the health things, I can go through. I kind of had a few statistics I'd like to share, but I can do it throughout the conversation. I don't want to monopolize because I want to hear from Tyler too when he raises his hand. But I got a bunch of statistics to kind of level set, that like what's the research tell us? There's all sorts of books out there. The two I would recommend, there's a really deep one. It's called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And I can't really pronounce her name, but I'll just show it to you. It's Shoshana Zuboff. And you can see how thick it is. It's dense reading, but it talks about how the whole economy has changed, and we are now an attention economy. It's very deep. I just want to I don't want to go through it with you. I just want to refer it to you. Then there's another one, that is pretty interesting. It's called Indistractable. So the thesis is, they've created these things to be so irresistible that many of us are in a potential or a perpetual state of distraction. Okay, because we're being, the economic model is to capture our attention. So that training where I made those statements was the battle for our attention training. And I'd love to someday go through it with you so you can kind of see what we're doing. I know we won't have time for that, but I'll give you a few stats. So 300 million people now, 95% of Americans, use a tablet, a wearable device, or a smartphone. Adults spend about 7 hours a day on these digital devices or screens, so screens like this or our digital devices. Teens spend about 9 hours a day, and that's entertainment media. And half of them in these surveys say we're on continuously. But use 9 hours just for sake of discussion. And so 7 hours with adults, 9 with children online. So I'm just going to do the math for you. 7 hours a day online, 49 hours a week, over 2,500 hours in a year. It's about 106 days in a year. So if you multiply that out, like if you're age 18, let's just say, and you multiply it out to age 80, you'll spent over 18 years, on the internet, liking, swiping. They say we look at these devices 144 times a day on average, and then we swipe and scroll swipe up 2,500 times. We're checking it. We're doing something with it to engage with it. Now, remember, they created it to be that way. So back in my old role at Dakota Medical, we had a woman named Anna Lemke. She's a psychiatrist, Stanford. And she wrote the book Dopamine Nation. That'd be the only other book I'd tell you that perhaps you should read. But you could probably just listen to her on a YouTube and pretty much get her thesis is scientifically, we get a dopamine hit every time we hit like, swipe, we check our phone, that the deal comes up on our email, text, whatever. So it's part of becoming an automatic thing with us. So we're experiencing this pull, this addiction to our devices. So I'll just give you a couple more. The average person receives 121 emails per day. They're reviewed within 6 seconds. Now, these are averages. These are averages, Rob, and Tyler. Average person receives 46 texts per day. 18 to 24-year-olds receive about 100, or it says 109. And these are just notes I took, so I'm just kind of giving you the overview. 95% of these texts are read within 3 minutes, but the average is 90 seconds, the average response time. So average person also receives 46 social media notifications a day. Young adults, though, they get over 200 plus. So the average response time to those is 3 minutes. So what I'm setting up is that we're constantly distracted, Rob, with these things if we leave these things on and in front of us. So I already gave you do you know that the average person scrolls about a mile a day? I mean, I was just floored when we learned this. But we had this Anna Lemke come out and give a talk to about 150 people in Fargo in August of 2023. So we were able to kind of put these things together. And how we got into it is a group that we had convened of mental health practitioners. And we said, what are the root causes to this? The number one thing that came up was this, the use of the smartphone. So here's just another stat for in the workplace. So in the workplace, this is just an average poll. They could have probably different polls, different times, but 2.5 hours is spent online, non-related to the work at hand. That's just an average, all across America. Okay, that's like a Gallup or one of those polls. Okay, so what's the number one worry is that we're losing our ability to think deeply, to focus, and concentrate. So I'm in the present moment with you. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not being distracted. I'm enjoying the time spent having a conversation. I will shut up so I can hear from you in just a moment. But here's one for you on college kids. So college kids can only focus on any one task for about 65 seconds. 65 seconds. In another study, office workers' average focus time was about 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So so some of these studies indicate that we can work in front of a digital device an average of 40 seconds before we're distracted or interrupted. Generally, these are notifications that come up, which in our training, we teach people to turn your notifications off when you really want to do deep work. Here's just a couple other mental health statistics. 60% of people in the United States today feel lonely. 40% of Americans have no best friends. And in 1990, 33% of Americans had 10 plus close friends. And by 2021, I'd like to get updated figures. That dropped to 13%.
Yeah.
So again, that kind of level sets where we are. Sorry to go on too long. I just wanted to give you sort of what formed the basis for that training that led to that statement, because I feel like it was important to share and have a meaningful discussion with you and Tyler today.
Yeah, for sure, Pat. You made some really great points in there, especially when it comes to distraction and being present for the job. One question I kind of have for you then, so past obviously getting awareness out there, which is a huge thing for you, and I think you're doing a great work with that. Do you have any plans to implement any actual workplace policies at the HHS with something like no phones in meetings, anything like that?
That's a great question. And so as we want to be one of the pillars that this administration wants to do and wants to pursue is the healthiest workplace in America being NDHHS. So that will certainly be one of the things that we plan to look at in terms of how are we using our devices as a tool, and how can we limit the distractions for when we're trying to be the best we can at being leaders, managers, and supervisors? So when we're holding meetings together, we're 100% in the moment of the meeting, which, everything we do should be connected up to being the healthiest state in the nation, but it has to start with us being a model, and we need to model the behavior for what it means to us. So I feel like they will be social norms rather than dictated rules. I want everyone to figure out, what does that mean to them within like if you're running a human service center in Fargo and you have a team of committed people to this, they have to talk through how would we put this into place. So we're using it as a tool. We're being family friendly because we want people to know that if they've got a sick kid at home, or if they need, they need to tend to something that's super important, they should have their phone with them. And so we want to make sure we're having meaningful dialogues about what's a smart way to approach this in a team and a collaborative sense. Because remember, all this is new from, we're just learning about it. So we're all learning together.
Let me interject because I share some personal history. And it's actually funny that this conversation is happening on September 10th because 24 years ago today, I was sitting as a 21-year-old, was sitting in my living room on a dial-up modem before Facebook and Twitter existed. And spending inordinate amounts of time. I started a blog, and spent, I would work all day and then spend 5 or 6 hours a night working on this blog that ultimately led to my career. That was screen time. To this day, I probably, those statistics you read, I wish I only got 46 texts a day. I use my stuff inordinately. And what really worries me is that we seem to be talking about screen time as though it was this monolithic thing, as if there weren't different types of screen time. If somebody's spending 8 hours a day doom scrolling Facebook, I agree. That's unhealthy. But sometimes my son comes home from school and gets on his Chromebook that I'm able to monitor his screen time and everything, gets on his Chromebook, starts a Facebook Kids Messenger video chat with his friend who lives in a different place, and they spend a couple of hours working on a video game that they're building together. I don't look at that as equivalent screen time to the doom scrolling. I think that's very creative. I think that's very social. They're talking, they're laughing, they're building something, they're learning stuff. And I worry that what's going to get caught up in all this is just I worry that it's a bunch of old people, myself included, who are looking at the way the kids are socializing today and looking at the way they're creating today and seeing that it's not like how it was when we grew up and deciding that must be bad. Now, I agree. I mean, if you want to say all things in moderation, I get it. You got to get up. You got to move around. You can't live in the virtual world. You have to touch grass sometimes, as the internet's prone to say. But I worry that this is a moral panic. I'm looking at this, and I say it again. I was the video game generation. I was told that Grand Theft Auto and Doom were going to turn me into a sociopath, and it didn't happen. In fact, we saw one of the most precipitous declines in violent crime this country's ever seen. So I don't think that was because people were playing video games. I think that was probably some other factors. But the panic never arrived. Like the justification for the panic never arrived. So when I hear some of you throwing all these statistics, my mind just goes, here we go again. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, that's an intellectual dialogue we're having, and you're setting up a family structure that's quite solid. And, you have a core creative energy where you use digital devices as a tool. I mean, if you took the assessment, you're not in the problem state. There's just a simple assessment that we use that's not, it's just 14 or 15 questions. It's not like the multiphasic personality inventory or anything of the sort, but it just puts you like, how are you in relationship to your use, and is it helping you? The question with your device use, is it helping you become the you would like to be? Because that's your choice. Is it enhancing your ability to have relationships that you would like to have? And so those things that you mentioned about your son, those are great. That's a great use of technology. Technology is also a tool. So it's like fire. Fire is fabulous when you're having a campfire. No problem. You're roasting some more, you're doing marshmallows, you're doing s'mores, but fire can also burn down the house. So it's a useful thing. It's very useful. There's no panic relative to healthy use of technology. None whatsoever. In fact, we should encourage the use of technology where it's helping you advance you and who you want to be, your relationships, and what you're passionate about, your service to others, your work, your creativity.
Let me ask this follow-up question then, because the thing is the cell phones and Facebook and the tablets and the smartwatches, they're not going away. They're here to stay. But what we've done with this school policy, specifically in North Dakota, is we have said that for roughly 9 months a year, for the bulk of your waking time during the week, you're not allowed to have these devices. They have to be locked away somewhere. So I hear that and I'm wondering, how do we teach kids how to have healthy relationships with their devices when we're just taking the devices away? Like, to me, that doesn't teach responsibility. That's just the device is bad. Not, I'm wondering, how are they going to come out of school, out of their childhood and into adult life with where these phones are going to exist? Will this policy have taught them how to have good relationships with these devices, or is it just prohibition?
So remember, there's 24 hours in a day, just from a standpoint of parents still control, the environment within which their kids grow up, values, norms. For instance, when you have a family meal together, are you present? And that goes for us, goes for me, with my kids and everything of the sort. But you're in charge of your family structure, as a parent, or with guardians and others that take care of children. So when we're in school, we're there to learn. So can we learn if the studies tell us that learning is impaired when you're in a constant distractive state? These things were designed to be irresistible. We didn't know that. We didn't know that at the time. So what I think they're understanding with this is that, look, these things, when used correctly and used as a tool, are fabulous inventions. They have more capabilities than the Apollo 11. I mean, this thing has more.
Under the current policy, what capacity do students have to use their phones as a tool during the school day?
Well, they certainly have device use, because they're still having online curriculum. They still have those things. And so, as you know, this thing used to be a phone. This thing became a computer over time. I mean, this has the capabilities. I can pretty much do everything, from this device. So what they're learning is that it's like, there were no guardrails, Rob, before. So what do we regulate with kids today? We regulate alcohol and drugs. We say you have to be a certain age before. Why? Because kids don't have the protective factors that we have based on years of experience. And so there's all sorts of history with parents making sure they're providing safe environments for their children. So providing a learning environment doesn't have to have a continuous distraction. And if you interview some people within schools, they'll start to show. I've interviewed people like in Fargo, and they're showing socialization. They're not buried in their phone like this. They're meeting with one another, developing social skills. They're bantering back and forth instead of doing this with half sentences and photos. They're learning what you and I are doing: discernment, dialogue, humor, joy, sharing tragedy together, being supportive, instead of being buried in their phone. Social skills are being stunted by this, and you can find a whole body of information and science behind that. And the deep thinking capabilities and creativity are being blunted by the addiction. Why? Because it's a distraction. It doesn't let us have these experiences. If life is a series of experiences, tell me what we're preventing, just in that 8 hours. I mean, we're trying to give them also socialization. How do I work with people? How do I play on the playground without a device? How do I do all these things so that we can experience the creativity that we were called to share with each other? And those are the formative years, the developing years. Jonathan Haidt would be the other book that it's called Anxious Kids. You probably already know all about it, but his website traces the teen. He can trace the teen mental health and the correlation, what happened when these phones were, which we didn't get any warning. I gave it to my kids early. We didn't know. I thought it was fun. I didn't know. Had I known the dangers with it, we probably wouldn't have experienced some of the things we experienced in our household. As real, I'm not blaming it on just that, by the way. I think there's complex factors with everything. So know that this isn't a one, a one item issue. I mean, if we get people healthy diet, healthy physical activity, I mean, those are awesome things for our health and well-being. So this, along a myriad of other things, are contributing factors to this teen mental health. But if you look at Haidt's slides, he goes through how it correlates directly with the advent of the smartphone and all these social media apps that people are on. And he cites, anxiety, depression, mental health problems going up in kids, more so with girls than boys. And so certainly there's studies correlating these things. So I do think it's where we need to start talking about it. I don't think we should be and have a panic. I think we should have meaningful discussions like we're having today.
And you make some great points with those mental health issues and aspects with it too. And I think you said something along the lines of we've upgraded phones in only so many years, but we haven't really upgraded humans yet. And we're in the stage now where these things aren't probably going away. And we have started to see some of these unknowns at the time when technology is created. We don't know what we don't know. We're finding out some of those implications and ramifications of it all. And now you look forward to the future. How do we start to develop and build a society where we can deal with these things a little bit better and start to maybe negate those mental health aspects while still without getting rid of the devices themselves at this stage?
Yeah, I think it's having meaningful discussions like this and ensuring that we're thoughtful and intentional in how we're addressing this and making sure, that parents need to be aware because ultimately parents are in charge of their children. And that's it should be something that we preserve, in terms of who can have the greatest impact on a child, a parent or a caregiver, for
Mm.
sure. Teachers, in particular, coaches, mentors, friends, family, beyond that, but certainly the people we hang out with the most, we become the average of. I mean, that you can kind of show, how you get better when you hang around with better people. And so we want to make sure we're talking about, hey, what does this mean to you? And, Rob came up with a really good example about how his son is using it in a great way to promote relationships, creativity, all those things. And so that's fabulous. And those are the kinds of things we have to talk about. But the other one we need to talk about is just what's happening with society itself. Are we able to have these kind of discussions in a civil and kind manner, or is social media, being designed to be more outrageous and more polarizing and placing people at the extremes where they're not even viewing reality in such a way that we can have a meaningful debate and a dialogue? And that's kind of how social media has been designed so that they're capturing more people's attention. But just back to North Dakota teens, you know, suicide is the second leading cause of death, teens, 10 to 19. It's a serious issue. If this is part of the discussion, we should be having it. That this is obviously there's studies out there that say that the correlation between excessive use and depressive thoughts, hopeless thoughts, has been made time and time again. So again, it's not the only one, but it's a serious issue that we all need to discuss. We all know someone or whose family has been impacted by suicide, including mine. So it's a serious issue that we need to discuss, but not in a moral panic type of a situation, but in a meaningful, reflective exchange of ideas about what do we do with this.
Well, that's I think that's one thing I would really like to hear is an acknowledge because I think there's just we're in a very scolding mode. Everybody's getting scolded about their
Yes.
screen. And I think it first of all it ignores some of the wonderful things that this connectivity has made possible.
Yes.
We're ignoring a lot of that, and we're treating all screen time like it's the same, and it's not. There are very productive, very good ways to do this that aren't shouting at your neighbor on Facebook because they didn't vote for the right person in the last election.
Yes.
Um, there are positive things. One quick thing before we go, last question. I know we just have a couple minutes left with you. I wanted to ask, I know there's been some turbulence with federal funding flowing into the state. There's a lot of federal dollars in your department's budget. Have you guys seen delays? How is that going? I know we've heard some other places where there's been delays for funding. We just heard recently the universities were in the headlines, worried about research dollars getting held up. Um, your department's a pretty vital one for our state. How are things going in terms of federal funding? Is there a lot of uncertainty, or what's going on?
Well, one thing I wanted to say, and I had a note about that just to remind myself to talk to you about today, is we have a real opportunity with one of them. While we do hear all the stuff that you're just saying, not necessarily, just a lot of change. But what I wanted to tell you about is with that big, beautiful bill, there's what's called the Rural Health Transformation Grants. And that would be, Rob, 100 million, and Tyler, 100 million a year for 5 years to enhance the rural delivery of healthcare, to prevent chronic disease, to maximize the use of technology. Those guidelines should be out, like I think within days. So we'll know more then, but I know we have to put and so we've been doing listening and learning tours and sent out surveys to legislators, to providers, all across the state, and we've got over 900 responses, for ideas on what we could do to enhance care delivery and preserve the models of rural healthcare delivery, and then also hit and try to hit on preventing chronic disease and how do we deal with chronic disease. Because if you want to control costs, you're going to go after chronic disease and try to reduce people's suffering from chronic disease as best you can, and then to deal with it once they have it. So that's a real opportunity. And I did want to leave you with one positive thing. It's an opportunity of a lifetime, Rob, for this, for the rural area. So that's what I leave you with.
Well, we'll put a pin in it there, Pat. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Pat. It was a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you.